Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. And today, we're talking about something I think a lot of you are interested in, which is using science to understand how we can rewire our brains for abundance.
Ooh, I love that topic.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about this YouTube video that I watched, which was Dr. Tara Swart-Bieber on the Mel Robbins podcast.
Okay.
And she's a neuroscientist.
Cool.
And the really interesting thing is that she initially started as a total skeptic about manifestation.
Really?
Yeah, and she was like, I don't believe in any of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then through her own research, she actually became a believer. So we're going to kind of see what convinced her.
That's so fascinating how she went from like doubter to advocate, by following the evidence.
Yeah.
It definitely makes me curious about like what is the science behind it all?
Right. And it's not just wishful thinking. Like there's actual brain power involved.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us to like neuroplasticity. Like what is that all about?
Neuroplasticity. Yeah, it's actually simpler than it sounds. It basically means that your brain can change and grow throughout your life no matter what your age is.
Oh.
So forget that old idea that like, your brain is fixed after a certain age. Like,
Right.
You can teach an old dog new tricks.
Okay.
It just means that your brain can adapt through things like, strengthening the connections between neurons, and even growing new brain cells.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's like constantly evolving.
Constantly evolving.
So she uses this analogy of like learning a language. So when you're first learning a language, it's like, this is so hard. And then the more you practice, the more those neural pathways become smooth and you can like speak fluently.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, with practice and consistent effort, those connections become stronger and you can actually rewire your brain.
Wow. So how do we take this rewiring from like just getting by to actually thriving?
Okay.
She kind of lays out this 4-step process. So what's the first step?
So the first step is to raise your awareness.
Yeah.
It's about really understanding, what is it that you truly desire?
Mm-hmm. And this takes some serious introspection.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some journal, brutal honesty with yourself.
So like digging deep and figuring out like what actually motivates you, not just like, oh, this sounds good.
Exactly.
Okay, so after we've kind of figured out our desires, what comes next?
Okay, so next you want to focus your attention.
Okay.
And that means, observing your actions and patterns.
Okay.
Especially those that are related to your goals.
Uh-huh.
So think of it as like gathering data on yourself.
Interesting. So after we figure out our desires, like, okay, let's become more mindful about whether my actions are actually matching up with that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then comes the deliberate practice.
Okay.
So now we're talking about, taking consistent action towards what it is that you want.
Uh-huh.
And, this is where you have to expect to make mistakes and, kind of course correct along the way.
Okay.
It's all part of the process.
So what are some ways we can kind of move beyond just the wishing and actually get into that active rewiring?
What's the final piece of the puzzle?
The fourth step is accountability.
Okay.
And this is about, maintaining those new behaviors,
Right.
which can be tough.
Yeah.
So, think about things like support systems, like maybe coaches or therapists or even self-tracking methods.
Okay.
Just things that are going to help you stay on track.
So it seems like the key takeaway here is that manifestation is not like some passive thing.
No.
It's actively rewiring your brain and putting in the effort and being consistent and holding yourself accountable.
Couldn't put it better myself.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so to really power this whole process, she introduces this concept of magnetic desire.
Oh, yes, magnetic desire.
What is that all about?
So magnetic desire is about getting your head, your heart, and your gut all on board with what it is that you truly want.
Yeah.
So it's about creating this intense driving force.
Okay.
Have you ever had that experience where like you decide you want a specific car and then suddenly you start seeing that car everywhere?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Right. It's like your brain suddenly tunes in to what you're focused on.
It's like, oh my gosh, it's a sign.
Exactly. And there's actually neuroscience behind this.
Oh.
So our brains are bombarded with so much information all the time
Right.
that they have to be selective about what they pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And this is called selective filtering.
Okay.
So by focusing on what we truly want, we're essentially telling our brains, hey, this is important.
Okay.
Pay attention.
So we're training our brains to like prioritize those desires.
Exactly.
And then we're more likely to spot opportunities.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And then this is where it gets really interesting because she talks about vision boards.
Okay.
But she calls them action boards.
Action boards.
Action boards.
Okay. So I'm guessing she's emphasizing that it's not enough to just create the vision board. You have to take action inspired by like the goals and the images that you've put on it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's about turning that vision into action.
Right. She even mentioned this really surprising thing about the act of gluing down images on a vision board.
Oh, what is that?
So she found that if someone hesitates to glue down a certain goal, it might actually be a sign of some inner resistance they have towards that goal.
Wow, that's wild.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, so it's like that glue becomes like a symbol of your commitment to those desires.
Exactly.
And if there's resistance there, it's like, okay, let's explore that.
Yeah, let's explore that.
Now let's move on to something else that really intrigued me, which is intuition.
Oh.
So how does she approach intuition from like a scientific perspective?
So she actually demystifies intuition beautifully.
Okay.
She explains that, intuition isn't some magical power.
Okay.
It's not like a sixth sense or anything like that.
Right.
It's more like this vast library
Okay.
of learned experiences and wisdom that's stored in your brain and your nervous system.
So it's not just like gut feelings. It's about tapping into a wealth of knowledge that we might not even be like consciously aware of.
That's a great way to put it. And she draws on this concept called Hebbian learning, which essentially means that, our experiences create neural pathways.
Okay.
And those pathways, even the ones that we might have forgotten about, those form the basis of our intuition.
So it's like our brains are constantly learning and adapting, and those adaptations become part of our intuitive responses.
Exactly.
That's so interesting.
And there's another fascinating layer to this.
Okay.
So this intuition isn't just limited to the brain.
Okay.
It also involves the gut-brain connection.
Which explains why stress can sometimes cloud our intuitive clarity.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, when we're stressed, our bodies release cortisol, which, it impacts the communication between our gut and our brain. So it makes it harder to access that deep intuitive wisdom.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So what can we do to like tap into that intuition more effectively?
So she recommends journaling
Okay.
to actually track your decisions and recognize the patterns in your intuitive hits.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so it's like building a database of your own intuitive experiences.
Right, so we can learn to trust our intuition more.
Exactly.
Now, something that really stood out to me was her discussion of stress contagion.
Stress contagion, yeah.
I had no idea that stress could be so contagious.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
The idea that stress hormones can actually be transmitted from person to person.
Yeah, she gives this example of menstrual synchronization,
Oh, yeah.
where women who live in close proximity tend to have their cycles sync up.
Yeah, it's like we're subconsciously picking up on each other's hormonal signals.
That is so wild.
Right, and she ties this back to, the evolutionary origins of stress contagion. Paints this really vivid picture of, like, life in a prehistoric tribe.
So if the leader of the tribe was stressed, their stress hormones would signal danger to the rest of the tribe.
Exactly.
And that would ensure collective survival.
It's like an ancient alarm system.
Wow.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
This applies to modern life, too. So think about, a stressed out leader in a company.
Okay.
Or a parent at home.
Uh-huh.
Their stress can unintentionally spread to the whole team or family.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how do we protect ourselves from other people's stress, especially in today's world?
Right. And that's where mindfulness practices come in.
Okay.
Things like meditation or yoga or spending time in nature.
Okay.
Those can be incredibly helpful in reducing your own stress levels
Uh-huh.
and kind of creating that buffer zone between your internal state and the stress of others.
It's like building a shield
Yes.
against that like invisible wave of negativity.
Exactly.
Now, this brings up something that I think a lot of people struggle with, which is the belief that change is just too hard.
Right.
Or that they're incapable of it.
Yeah.
What does she have to say about that?
So she addresses that directly and reminds us that, neuroplasticity proves our incredible capacity for change.
Okay.
So it's like saying, look, your brain is designed to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
You are capable of change.
It's a powerful message of hope.
Yeah. And she goes on to say that the real barrier to change
Okay.
often boils down to not truly wanting to change at a deep level.
So it's not that we can't change. It's that a part of us might be resisting it.
Exactly. And that resistance might come from, fear or self-doubt or deeply ingrained beliefs about who we are and what we're capable of.
So how do we overcome that internal resistance?
Oh, it starts with identifying and addressing the root cause.
Okay.
So what are those underlying beliefs and fears that are holding you back?
We were talking about that story of the dad who was struggling with exercise because he felt guilty.
Oh, yeah.
And his breakthrough came when he realized that taking care of his health was the best way to be a good father long term.
Exactly. It's like finding that deeper, why
Yeah.
that truly resonates with your core beliefs.
Uh-huh.
And that can really unlock that motivation.
It's encouraging to know that, like, change is possible for everyone, regardless of our past experiences.
Yeah.
The key is to connect with that deep desire for change and align it with, like, what matters most to us.
Absolutely.
What really resonated with me was when she asked this question. When was the last time you were truly seen for who you want to be?
Ooh, that is a great question.
It's like, whoa.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you think about those times when you felt truly understood.
Yeah.
Like someone saw your potential even before you did.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, and it challenges us to, like, identify that gap between where we are and where we want to be. It's a call to move from dreaming to doing.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to shape our lives.
It's a reminder that we're not just passive passengers.
Right.
We're active creators.
We are.
Now, speaking of taking action, she also dives into some interesting daily practices.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about those.
So she talks about morning routines.
Oh, yeah. Morning routines.
She highlights how, like, starting the day intentionally can set the tone for everything that follows.
I love that.
Even simple things like expressing gratitude for something as basic as her silk pillowcase.
Oh, that sounds so luxurious.
Yeah.
But I can see how it fits with, the idea of intentionally shifting your focus to the positive.
Yeah, and it's like before the day's demands take over.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about consciously choosing to start in a state of appreciation
Uh-huh.
before, things get crazy.
She also talks about time-restricted eating.
Time-restricted eating.
Yeah, where she only eats between noon and 8 p.m.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. What's the science behind that?
So this aligns with, research on circadian rhythms,
Okay.
which is our body's natural clock.
Uh-huh.
And syncing your eating with this clock can actually really improve your metabolic health
Okay.
and even brain function.
That's really interesting. So it's like she prioritizes brain health in all of her choices.
Absolutely.
And recognizing that a healthy brain is, like, fundamental to well-being.
It is the control center.
Yeah, she talks about these 4 key food groups.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about these food groups.
So dark-skinned foods, hydrating foods, good fats, and fermented foods.
Okay, so it's not about, like, restrictive dieting. It's
Yeah.
about nourishing your brain
Yep.
with what it needs.
It's such a holistic approach.
I love that.
She even practices oil pulling.
Oil pulling.
Yeah.
Ah, yes, the ancient Ayurvedic technique.
Yeah, have you ever tried it?
I have not, but I've heard great things about it.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, it's where you swish oil around in your mouth.
Right.
And it's believed to improve oral hygiene and detoxification.
Yeah, I love how she kind of blends ancient wisdom with modern science.
Right, it's not just like one or the other, it's like using both.
Absolutely.
Now let's circle back to intuition for a moment,
Okay.
because it seems like this is something that she really emphasizes.
She does.
She actually teaches a course on intuition at MIT.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know.
It shows how intuition is increasingly, recognized,
Right.
even in, like, the business world.
Yeah, like as a valid form of, like, decision making.
Exactly.
It's not just woo-woo anymore.
No, it's not.
So how does she explain how intuition works?
Okay.
Especially for people who might be skeptical.
So she uses the lens of Hebbian learning, which we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
Remember, neurons that fire together wire together?
Right.
So our experiences, even the ones we've forgotten about,
Okay.
they create pathways that shape our intuitive responses.
So it's like our intuition is drawing on this vast database
Yeah,
of our entire life experience
exactly.
to help us make decisions in the present moment.
Yes, and it reinforces the importance of trusting those gut feelings.
Now here's something that blew my mind.
Okay, what is it?
She mentioned that stress hormones, specifically cortisol, can actually be released through our sweat.
Isn't that wild?
That is crazy.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly broadcasting our internal state
Right.
through these subtle signals.
That explains why we might feel drained after being around someone who's stressed.
It's like literally picking up on their stress hormones.
It's also highlighting, the importance of managing our own stress.
Right.
Not just for ourselves, but for the people around us.
Like a ripple effect.
It is a ripple effect. And remember that stress contagion that we talked about?
Yeah.
You know how it was beneficial for survival back in the day
Right, with the prehistoric tribe.
with the prehistoric tribe?
If the leader was stressed, everyone knew to be on alert.
Exactly.
Huh.
But that same principle applies today.
All right.
So, you know, a stressed boss or parent
Uh-huh.
can unintentionally spread that stress to their team or family.
It's like they're the leader of their own little tribe.
Exactly.
So mindfulness practices become even more crucial
They do.
in our interconnected worlds, not just to manage our own stress, but to prevent it from spreading to others.
I couldn't agree more. And, she also pointed out something really interesting about our social circles
Okay, what's that?
and their impact on us.
You know that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with?
Yeah, I've heard that before.
There's actually some scientific backing to that idea.
Really?
So our brains are actually wired to mirror the behaviors of those around us.
Oh.
So, for example, if our friends are overweight, we're more likely to be overweight.
Oh, wow.
If they're fitness enthusiasts, we're more likely to exercise.
So it's not just about, willpower.
It's not just about willpower.
It's about, who we surround ourselves with.
Exactly. It's about creating a social ecosystem that supports our well-being and growth.
Now, let's go back to that common obstacle we were talking about, where some people are like, oh, I'm just not capable of change.
Right?
What are some ways to, break free from that limiting belief?
So she addressed that directly.
Okay.
And she pointed to neuroplasticity as evidence that our brains are meant to adapt and grow.
Right.
So the real barrier to change often boils down to not truly wanting to change at a deep level.
So it's not that we can't change, it's that a part of us might be resisting it.
Exactly. And that resistance might come from fear, self-doubt, or deeply ingrained beliefs about who we are and what we're capable of.
So how do we overcome that internal resistance?
Well, it starts with identifying and addressing the root cause.
Okay.
So what are those underlying beliefs and fears that are holding us back?
We were talking about that story of the dad struggling with exercise because of guilt.
Oh, yeah.
And his breakthrough came when he realized that taking care of his health was the best way to be a good father long term.
It's such a powerful illustration of how aligning actions with values can unlock motivation.
Yeah.
It's like finding that deeper, why that truly resonates with your core beliefs.
It's encouraging to know that change is possible for everyone,
Absolutely.
regardless of our past experiences.
Yeah.
The key is to connect with that deep desire for change and align it with what matters most to us. What really resonated with me was when she asked this question, when was the last time you were truly seen for who you want to be?
Ooh, that is a great question.
It's like, whoa.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you think about those times when you felt truly understood. Like someone saw your potential even before you did.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, and it challenges us to, identify that gap between where we are and where we want to be. It's a call to move from dreaming to doing.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to shape our lives.
It's a reminder that we're not just passive passengers.
Right.
We're active creators.
We are.
It really makes you think about the vision you have for yourself.
Right.
And how to bridge that gap.
It's a powerful nudge to move from passive dreaming to active creation, recognizing our own agency and shaping our lives. And speaking of interconnectedness, remember how Dr. Swart-Bieber talked about stress being contagious?
Oh, yeah. That was mind-blowing. The idea that we can pick up on other people's stress through subtle cues.
Well, she mentioned another fascinating example of this type of synchronization, and this one's about women's menstrual cycles.
Wait, you mean that thing where women living close to each other end up syncing their cycles? I thought that was just an old wives' tale.
Nope. It's actually a well-documented phenomenon, and it has fascinating evolutionary roots going back to those prehistoric tribes we talked about earlier.
Okay. I'm really curious now. Tell me more.
Think about it. If all the women in a tribe were fertile at the same time, it would increase the chances of conception and survival for the entire group.
So it's an evolutionary adaptation, like a built-in mechanism for collective survival.
Exactly. It's remarkable how our bodies are wired for connection, and how even our hormonal cycles can be influenced by those around us. It makes you wonder what other subtle ways we might be interconnected.
It really does. So we've got stress contagion cycle syncing. Are there other examples of this kind of biological synchronization?
Well, Dr. Swart-Bieber brought up how our sweat can actually transmit stress hormones, which we talked about earlier. It all ties into the idea that we're not isolated beings, but part of a larger web of energy and information.
This whole deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a completely new understanding of how my brain works and how I can use that knowledge to shape my reality.
It's been a pleasure exploring these concepts with you. And remember, rewiring for abundance is an ongoing journey. It takes effort, self-awareness, and a willingness to embrace change.
It's about recognizing our own power to create the lives we desire and stepping into our full potential.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It really makes you think about the vision you have for yourself and how to bridge that gap.
It's a powerful nudge to move from passive dreaming to active creation, recognizing our own agency and shaping our lives. And speaking of interconnectedness, remember how Dr. Swart Bieber talked about stress being contagious?
Oh yeah, that was mind-blowing, the idea that we could pick up on other people's stress through subtle cues.
Well, she mentioned another fascinating example of this type of synchronization, and this one's about women's menstrual cycles.
Wait, you mean that thing where women living close to each other end up syncing their cycles? I always thought that was an old wives' tale.
Nope, it's actually a well-documented phenomenon, and it has fascinating evolutionary roots going back to those prehistoric tribes we talked about earlier.
Okay, I'm really curious now. Tell me more.
So think about it. If all the women in a tribe were fertile at the same time, it would increase the chances of conception and survival for the entire group.
So it was like an evolutionary adaptation, like a built-in mechanism for collective survival.
Exactly. It's remarkable how our bodies are wired for connection and how even our hormonal cycles can be influenced by those around us. Makes you wonder what other subtle ways we might be interconnected.
It really does. So we've got stress, contagion, cycle sync. Are there other examples of this kind of biological synchronization?
Well, Dr. Swart Bieber brought up how our sweat can actually transmit stress hormones, which we talked about earlier. It all ties into the idea that we're not isolated beings, but part of a larger web of energy and information.
It's like we're all energetically connected in ways we don't even fully understand.
Exactly.
This whole deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. I feel like I have a completely new understanding of how my brain works and how we can use that knowledge to shape my reality.
I've really enjoyed exploring these concepts with you today. And remember, rewiring for abundance is an ongoing journey. It takes effort, self-awareness, and a willingness to embrace change.
Absolutely. It's about
But
recognizing our own power to create the lives we desire and stepping into our full potential.
I love that.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into rewiring our brains for abundance. What an incredible conversation.
He really was.
I encourage all of you to keep diving deep and keep rewiring for abundance. We'll see you in the next episode.